And so we're going to disconnect power from the blue wire and the light turns on. What is going on here? Let's talk about ceiling fans. Specifically, fans that are becoming a bit more ubiquitous throughout the ceiling fan market, where they come with an already installed integrated receiver and remote functioning system to interact with both the fan and the light. The reason being because these fans, while on first blush may appear to have the same wiring, so you think that things are going to function in a similar way, once you get them hung and you start interacting with your existing wall switches, you may find out that that really just isn't the case. So real quick, just to give you an example, I've got this fan wired up temporarily with some jumper wire so I can disconnect and reconnect things very clearly so that you can see that happen. I didn't want to have things hidden behind switches where all of that became kind of confusing if something was on or off, because the state of things can change, as you'll see. So I'm going to disconnect the blue wire, which is normally associated with the lighting control, which is connected to power right now. And when I do that, the light turns on. And then I'm going to reconnect it to the blue wire and the light turns off. And instinctively, that should tell you right out the gate that there's something really different happening with the way that this fan is functioning. So just to give you a quick little backstory, 2 years ago, we moved into a new house. We needed to buy 9 ceiling fans to install throughout the whole place. And I instinctively knew at that time that I wanted to stay away from fans with integrated receivers and remotes for controlling the fans. The reason being primarily at that time was that I did not want to have 9 remotes with batteries that I had to change, or exterior wall mount remotes like this that could potentially wander off from room to room and then get confused with other remotes. And I also wanted to use smart dimmers of my choice so that I could control lights, set them up on schedules, have them turn on in the evening, dim down, and then ultimately turn off at the end of the night after we've gone to bed, so I don't have to run all over the house turning things off. And with these newer fans, you're really not allowed, or you should not be using any other dimmers and dimmer controls with them. So with these 2 fans, the reason I've got myself kind of shoehorned into this situation is we have an exterior patio that we need to replace a fan on. So I needed a moisture resistant fan, a dust resistant fan. I needed a fan of a particularly larger diameter since it was going to be outside on a patio. And as a result, the options just get whittled down really quickly. So now I kind of have to get one with a remote and everything. And I wish I didn't, but here we are. So in reading reviews and comments online about these, I immediately realized that there were a lot of people that were frustrated and confused by the wiring and didn't understand why their existing wall switches weren't working right, and they were taking them back to the stores, and they just did not like them. And so I downloaded the manuals because I thought, well, let me read the wiring on these and see if I can understand what's going on. And when I read the manuals, I kind of had an inkling that something wasn't being told to me, or that there was something being omitted. And I don't want to say that there is. I think looking at it now, it's just that the way that these function and the way that the manufacturers are expecting you to utilize them and interact with them is so different that they don't even bother to tell you that, oh, hey, by the way, if you had an old fan, this is going to be different. Okay. So like I said, both of these, for all intents and purposes, are kind of the same. This one comes with an LED module. This one comes with a bulb base for the light. This one has an exterior mount remote that goes on your wall and a little cradle. I think I mentioned cradle, screws to your wall and this sockets in. And some people don't like this. It's a little wall warty, okay? But, we'll get to that in a bit. This fan comes with this device that you put into your switch box. You end up replacing one of your switches with this, and it gets wired into your black wire, okay, that goes up to your fan. But the deal is that this is a remote, and I think a lot of the confusion almost begins with this because of the fact that this is still a remote, but it doesn't come across as a remote, so your thinking about it isn't the same. It takes two AAA batteries in the back. It is so much of a remote, in fact. So you probably wonder, well, then what is the purpose of wiring it to main power like that? Well, it's because there's a contactor switch down here at the bottom. Okay, that contactor switch disconnects power flowing through your black wire. Even though that contactor switch, is disconnected, I still have my blue wire connected to power right now. So you would think I would be able to turn on the light, but by touching that button, I cannot. Okay, I'm going to reconnect power to the black wire and show you that I can in fact turn this light on from this remote, because it is truly a remote. There's no way of getting around that. Everything from the contactor switch up is a remote. The fan control, the speed control, the light button, and the dimming of the light is all handled through the remote and the receiver. Okay, so I can turn this on and I can turn this off. But I can still do that even if I disconnect the blue wire. Okay? So now you may be asking, well, why do we even have the blue wire? Well, the manufacturer doesn't even necessarily intend for you to use that blue wire. Okay, so let's just assume that you've got one switch by your door when you come into your room. And your old ceiling fan had your blue wire that controlled the light and the black wire that controlled the fan motor. Both of those wires were gained together, maybe. And when you turn that switch on, both the wires would receive power, meaning the fan and the light would turn on, and you could go and control them by the chains. Okay? Another way that things may have been wired in your ceiling would have been the black wire connected to power permanently, and then the blue wire is connected to your switch. That's probably a little bit more common and would have been preferred, I'm sure, by a lot of people, so that you could leave your ceiling fan running independent of your light. And once you got your light on, with your pull chain, you never even really had to touch that pull chain. A lot of people took that longer chain completely off so that somebody wouldn't inadvertently turn the light off from there, to basically force you to have to use the wall switch, because really that's what you need and should be using anyways, because when you come into a room, you need to be able to turn on a light at the door so you don't stumble across something. You don't really need to turn a fan on. So, and most people are going to leave their fans on potentially anyways. So that's what the older fans did. These fans still have the blue and the black wire, so you think everything's going to wire up all the same. Well, it's going into that receiver module, and when it does, the receiver module then sends power back out to the motor and the light. Well, depending on what state the light is in, is kind of what happens when you push this button or connect power to that blue wire. So if you had a single switch situation, you wouldn't be using the blue wire, as we stated. You would come in and you would simply turn on the light and turn the light off from that button, and you would turn the fan on and off from that button. But imagine you come in and someone before you got there inadvertently, or maybe just on purpose because that was the way they decided to turn the fan off, they went ahead and killed power through the contact switch down at the bottom, so it disconnected the black wire. Well, when you came in to turn the light on, nothing's going to happen, So you reconnect power with the contactor switch, and now you can finally turn the light on. Okay, but you had to kind of play some games there, which is a little unfortunate. And it's also unfortunate because the surface of this is so smooth, you really don't know what you're smacking on, especially in the dark, and if you have dexterity issues, that can become a real issue. But now what if you come in and you go to turn the light on, and it still doesn't turn on even after you've hit everything? Well, it's potentially because you've got dead batteries, and this is buried in the wall. So what kind of complications now are you getting into to have to remedy this in the dark, late at night? You just got home, you're tired. Is this what you want to be dealing with? You got to go find a screwdriver, figure out which breaker it is that controls this. If you don't like rooting around in boxes with power on, which most people don't, hope that you've got some AAA batteries on hand. And when you pull the switch plate cover off, hopefully you don't go peeling paint, because how often have you done that? So that is an awful lot to have to contend with just to get your light to turn on. Now imagine you've moved into a new house that you've purchased and you've been there for like a year or more. I don't really know how long these batteries last, but you've been there for a while, the fan and the light were working, and now all of a sudden nothing's working. And you feel like you've checked everything. Maybe you're not that comfortable with electricity and dealing with these sort of problems anyways, but you've checked a few things, at least on your own. So you call an electrician. They come out, and you end up paying somebody a lot of money to replace a couple AAA batteries. I can only suspect that has happened on more than one occasion to somebody out there, and I can only imagine how upset they were about that. So, there's a lot going on just in the discussion of this in a single switch scenario, right? So let's sort of now move to the second scenario that you might most likely have, which would be if you had two toggle switches existing for your old fan. You're going to replace one of the switches with this, okay? And you want to leave the other switch to control your light separately because you really do like to be able to do that. So, it's just what you feel natural from your interacting with it in the past. Okay, so we will reconnect our blue wire to power, which will turn our light on. And that is what you expect to have happen, right? And so when you're hanging this up and you're initially messing with everything, you're thinking, we are rocking and rolling. We've got this wired up right. This is fantastic, okay? You can still turn the light off from this remote, even though that wire has power, which means that the switch is in the opposite state that you have been so accustomed to for so many years in your home. And you think, well, now wait, what happened here? Why is the switch now up, but the light is off? Did I do something wrong? Did I, make an error? And you didn't. It's just that this control module is looking for something to happen. It's operating like an electronic three-way switch at the end of the day. It's the best way I can think of to explain it, right? So if the state of the light is off and you press this button, the light is going to turn on. If you disconnect power here, the light is going to turn off, okay? If the light is already on because you pressed this button and then you apply power to the blue wire, it's going to cause the light to turn off. The reason it's doing this, and the reason they've built this functionality into this, and this is kind of what I realized as I was thinking through this, is in our situation on our patio, we have a three-way light switch for the fan light already. There's a light in one room that goes out to the patio, or a switch in one room that goes out to the patio, and then there's a switch in another room. You can't even see the switches from one another. And they needed to come up with a way to be able to satisfy that situation when people have that happening. Usually when you have a three-way switching situation, the switches are far apart. Like in our case, they're in two separate rooms. Usually they're on opposite ends of a larger room, a grand room or family room or something like that. And so when those switches are getting into different positions to be either on or off, you don't really think about it. You kind of divorce yourself from that issue. But when the switches are right next to each other, I think that's when things get really confusing for people, because sometimes this switches up and you press the button to turn it on, and sometimes this switches down and you press the button to turn it on. And that can get really, I can see that getting a little confusing and frustrating for people, because they just wanted to use the switch for the light, and they would like for the switch to be in the same state, because when you walk into a room, you're used to doing either a swipe up or a swipe down to turn on your light, and you kind of always like it that way. Now, the other potential weird scenario you could get in with this situation is, like before, someone has left the room, the light was in the off position, and then they turned off the contact switch because maybe the fan was chilly, or as they were leaving, that was just what they did because they were leaving the room and they're just so accustomed to doing that. And so they've now disconnected power to the whole unit. So you come in and you flip the toggle switch up and down, light doesn't turn on. You press this button a few times. The light still doesn't turn on. And then you remember, oh, the contact switch down below, I need to make sure that's on. So you jump up and down on that a couple of times, and the light still does not turn on. And so you have touched 3 different switches and buttons a multitude of times, and you haven't gotten that light to turn on. And I feel like there is a potential situation where you could kind of get yourself into a bad feedback loop here with this, because people tend to, when they do something, they go 1, 2, 1, 2, and you're right back into the same state you started with on that particular switch or button. And you would do the same thing with this. You would kind of 1, 2, 1, 2 with it, and you would find yourself right back into the same state, and that thing still is not turning on. And I can only imagine the level of frustration that would create. I can only imagine that frustration if you have this across the room or your house a multitude of times. If you've got, like we do, 9 ceiling fans, and every time you're going in and out of a room and you're looking to just turn on or off a light, you know, you're having to play a lot of games potentially. The frustration level, I feel like, could get really high really quick. And so I would imagine that's why a lot of these maybe get returned. You know, not to mention, again, the batteries in something like this. If you had a whole bunch of these across a house and you're having to take these out of a wall box all the time, you know, with some regular infrequency, that would get a little exhausting, having to deal with that just to get lights working, you know, through your house, because they're not going to die all at the same time. So yeah, this fan with this remote, it's at least an exterior remote. You understand it as soon as you walk up to it that I'm interfacing with a remote. This fan still has the blue and the black wire for controlling the motor and the light. So I'm planning on, I think, you know, going with this fan because I like the fact that you don't have to dig in a box to replace some batteries. Anybody in the house should be able to do this. I like that it has bulb bases. I can get bulbs. I'm pretty sure, you know, I'm going to be able to get those for a while. I can get them from a grocery store and even from a gas station. These LED modules, I don't know what the situation is going to be like on these in the future. You might end up having to find some aftermarket type item. I just don't know. But the black and the blue wires on this one, I still intend to hook up to traditional switches because, like I mentioned, I have an existing 3-way switch scenario. So I want to just be able to walk over and flip a switch, turn on the fan when I go outside and it's muggy. And then as the sun sets in the evening and I'm still out on the patio, I can go flip a switch and turn the light on. And what I suspect is that I won't have to really mess with this too much. Once I get the fan speed to a setting that I like, once I flip the fan on, that's probably where I'll like it. And more than likely, when I'm on the back patio, I'm gonna want at least some amount of breeze, right? So it's gonna be powered, and then in the evening as the sun goes down, I'll just flip the switch for the light to turn on, and I'll have it already set to a level that I like. Unfortunately, the one thing that I won't be able to do is have the fan off if it should be getting chilly on a fall evening and keep the light on. And that's kind of, you know, that's where I wish they could have done some things different. You know, I would have to interface with this now. I would have to press the fan button to turn the fan off. But I do feel like the manufacturer, much like they could have figured out a way, I feel like, to power this through the main power, I do feel like they could have figured out a way to provide the consumer with some jumper wires and a little bit of instructioning so that you take this top cowling off, and when you do, you can clearly see all the wires. You can see where they're all going. They're all colored. So you could have created a situation so that your blue wire would have just ran straight on down to your lights and never gone into the integrated receiver. And I think that could have cleared up a lot of frustration for a lot of people. It would have at least given people an option to do something like that easily. You know, it could have potentially helped keep some of these units from being returned. And in my case, I would be able to use a smart dimmer of my choosing for that. So yeah, anyways, I hopefully answered some questions and cleared up some confusion with these. Like I said, if you tried to install one of these and got frustrated with it and took it back, it was not your fault. It probably really wasn't. It's just the way that these are made and the way that they are expecting you to interact with them that has changed so dramatically. So don't blame yourself. If you're looking to put one of these up in the near future, hopefully this video will help you kind of preemptively understand what you may be faced with your existing wall switch and wiring situation, and maybe you'll be able to figure out a way to adjust what you were thinking about doing. Maybe you'll make a decision, like maybe you would prefer to just have this as a single switch without the toggle. But again, keep in mind, I don't know what you're going to do to get that light to turn on if these batteries go dead. That's the bummer. That's the bummer with this. But be that as it may, at least you'll have the information. You can kind of help figure it out on your own. So thanks for watching. Hope it helps and clears up some confusion for some people.